Let's talk about fear. We're often most afraid of the things we can't see or smell or touch. But what happens when the biggest danger isn't that invisible threat, but our own fear of it? Today, we're diving into radiophobia and this really startling idea that our fear of radiation might have been way more deadly than the radiation itself.
I mean, really think about it. Things you can't see have this unique power over us. And for about 100 years now, one invisible force has sparked more panic and shaped more global policy than almost any other: radiation.
And this quote from a Reddit user just hits the nail on the head, right? It perfectly explains why we're so scared of it. Radiation is the ultimate mystery. That fear, it feels natural, totally understandable. But what if that gut instinct is leading us completely astray?
What if our terror of radiation has actually caused more death, more suffering, than the radiation from the worst nuclear accidents in history combined? The data we have suggests that's exactly the case. So today, we're going to put that incredible claim to the test.
All right, let's start with the big one, the name that's basically become a synonym for nuclear disaster. When you hear the words dangers of radiation, your mind probably goes straight to Chernobyl. We've all seen the haunting images, right? The abandoned city of Pripyat, the stories of a radioactive cloud sweeping across Europe. It is the ultimate horror story.
For decades, the UN Scientific Committee on Atomic Radiation, they're called UN SCAR for short, has been studying the health of every single person involved: the workers, the people who were evacuated, the nearby residents. So after all that time, what did they actually find?
Take a long look at this number. According to the UN's top scientists, as of 2008, this is the number of confirmed deaths that were directly caused by Chernobyl's radiation. Now, this includes 2 workers killed in the blast itself, 28 first responders who died from acute radiation syndrome, and about 15 later deaths from thyroid cancer. 45. It's a shocking number, but maybe not for the reason you think.
So, if direct radiation wasn't the main killer, what was? Well, let's pull up the disasters report card.
On one side, you have the tragic direct toll of radiation, but on the other, you have what the World Health Organization itself calls the biggest public health problem to come out of the accident: the damage to people's minds. Hundreds of thousands of people were crippled by anxiety, convinced they were doomed to die. This stress led to real illnesses, risky behavior, and get this, in the months after the accident, women across Europe, terrified of birth defects, had an estimated 1 to 200,000 elective abortions, even though the actual risk was basically zero. The fear, that radiophobia, was the real plague.
Now, fast forward 25 years. A massive earthquake and tsunami hit Japan, triggering another nuclear accident, this time at Fukushima. And it's here that the deadly lesson of radiophobia becomes, well, tragically impossible to ignore.
This is the number of people who have died from acute radiation sickness because of the Fukushima nuclear accident. 0. Just let that sink in for a second.
And this is the official count of disaster-related deaths among the evacuees. These are people who survived the earthquake, they survived the tsunami, but they died from the stress and pure chaos of the forced evacuation that followed.
Just look at this report card. 0 deaths from radiation sickness. Over 2,000 deaths caused by the fear of radiation. The panicked, rushed evacuation turned out to be far, far deadlier than the thing everyone was running from.
So how on earth does this happen? Well, the chaos of the evacuation caused a total collapse in medical care, especially for older folks in nursing homes. People lost everything overnight: their homes, their communities, their jobs. That kind of intense, long-term stress led to heart attacks, strokes, and a huge spike in mental health crises like PTSD. These were deaths that could have been prevented. They weren't caused by a nuclear meltdown, but by a meltdown of rational thinking.
And here's the final word from the UN Scientific Committee. The actual radiation risk to the public was so low that they don't expect to see any noticeable increase in cancer or genetic problems. The danger was a ghost. The reaction to it, though, was deadly real.
So this just begs a much bigger question, doesn't it? If our fear of nuclear power is so completely disconnected from reality, how does it actually compare to the other ways we light up our world?
This chart shows something that is just staggering. It compares the number of deaths for every unit of energy we produce, and that includes deaths from accidents and from long-term air pollution. Coal, you can see, is off the charts deadly. Oil is a distant second, and then way down at the very bottom, with the lowest death rate of any major energy source, is nuclear.
And think about this. We see hydropower as clean and safe, right? But the World Bank points out that huge dam failures have been responsible for a massive number of accidental deaths in the energy sector. For instance, the Bankyo Dam collapse in China back in 1975 killed an estimated 171,000 people. And yet there's no widespread hydrophobia. Nobody's panicking about dams.
So this really shows us where the true danger is. It's not in the rare, spectacular accidents that grab headlines. The World Bank makes it clear. The overwhelming damage to our health from making energy comes from one thing: the constant, grinding, day in, day out air pollution from burning fossil fuels. That stuff causes millions of premature deaths every single year. That is the real, ongoing catastrophe.
So this brings us all the way back to where we started. We've seen how radiophobia has led to these tragic, preventable deaths and has just totally warped our sense of risk.
Look, we live in a time where climate change is a genuine threat to our existence, and the world's top climate scientists are basically screaming that we cannot afford to let irrational fear take one of our best tools off the table. Nuclear power is one of the most effective ways we have to generate enormous amounts of electricity without pumping carbon into the atmosphere.
So I guess it leaves us with this final thought. If our fear has been the real disaster all along, maybe we've been terrified of the wrong thing. Maybe the real monster isn't the tiny, manageable risk from a highly regulated nuclear plant, but the giant, certain, and catastrophic risk of a planet that's getting warmer every day. What do you think?
Hey, thanks for digging into this with us. It's pretty clear that what we fear and why we fear it shapes our world in some really profound ways. Let us know what you're thinking down in the comments.